It's supposed to be, it's, because
Totally
it's it's totally recyclable, and it's made from recyclable stuff, so it's like,
It is.
you know.
15 seconds. Set your watch.
Set your clock by my arrival, right?
That's right.
I went to the Rolling Center first. It's musical chairs, I can't ever figure it out where we are.
This is why I put a sign on the door.
I know. I like that Janelle did that just for me.
I think it's somebody would do it, so I figured okay.
Ryan yard work, grass cutter.
Thanks for the reminders.
Pretty sure mine's on. Yeah.
I know that Rich Innes said he was on his way, so, Rich Innes.
Okay.
I know that he was coming, so. Deborah and Rich Innes, I know, told me they were on their, Deborah said she was coming, and Rich Innes spoke to me and said he was on his way, so. Yes. I think Rich and Deborah are planning to attend in person. I'm not sure whether Jonathan's calling in or coming in person.
Well, I think we've reached 6:30, so we will start the meeting. First order of business is election of officers. So we will start with election of the chair.
I would like to nominate Nancy Stacy for chair.
I'd second that with enthusiasm.
Me too.
Melanie wanted to get right to
Yes,
that.
we should say that Melanie declined to continue on, so.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Does she accept?
Yes.
Okay, the next will be the election of the vice chair.
I would like to nominate Melanie Moser for vice chair.
I accept, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Are you accepting?
I will
Are you
accept,
accepting?
yeah.
I will accept, yes. Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, secretary,
Can I make a nomination?
you may.
Okay. I'd like to nominate Bob Hefferman for secretary.
Or second?
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, so we have 3 officers duly elected. Thank you very much. And I'm
So now
passing the
passes
gavel.
over.
Switch seats.
I don't think we've ever used the gavel at this meeting, so I hope I don't have to be the first. So let's move on to unfinished business. The first item is C1, the update on the 5-year review of the comprehensive plan. Is Savannah doing this, or is she on?
She's on.
Fantastic. So we'll link Savannah in for an update on the comprehensive plan.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So you should be able to see in your packets for this evening, I believe it's pages 3 and 4. We worked about 2 weeks ago with the Committee on the Comprehensive Plan to identify and refine our list of recommendations. These are going to be focused recommendations for the next 5 years for the Planning Commission to work on, or consider, I should say, consider working on. Some of them you all may choose not to move forward with, but they at least deserve some recognition and initial consideration. I believe they're on the screen right now, so I'll just go through really quickly because these recommendations are what came out of the public workshop, so you've seen them before. But within the housing section, we chose to move forward with 3 recommendations. The first, considering live-work opportunities in additional zoning districts. The second is investigating options to update the code to require a diversity of housing units for new developments. Third is considering options to require new developments to contribute to an affordable housing set-aside, and exploring what different options and pros and cons are associated with other options. The one recommendation from the housing section we're not moving forward with is that LPC will instead recommend that the short-term housing committee investigates the concepts of accessory dwelling units and helps to refine that concept a little bit more before it perhaps maybe beyond the 5-year window moves back to LPC. Second, within historic and cultural resources, again, moving 3 of the recommendations forward. First, defining and codifying at-risk buildings. Second, considering changes that might be necessary for archaeological investigations on new developments, and what size developments would be appropriate for that. And then third, exploring the feasibility of expanding the historic district boundaries anywhere where it might be appropriate. The next section was annexation. We continue to want to develop appropriate incentives and encourage annexation. The first priority area, as the public workshop gave us feedback on, was for the Great Marsh UD vicinity area, second enclaves, and then third around the city's well fields. The fourth section was environmental resources, and we got a lot of positive feedback on all of the suggestions. So we are moving forward with all 4 of those, exploring what types of construction would be appropriate within the city's floodplains, and exploring feasibility of limitations, continuing to work with the tree ordinance subcommittee to develop a tree protection ordinance. I know you guys have already started that. Considering engaging the community in education and discussions on developing appropriate floodplain regulation and strategies. And then exploring an option for the creation or preservation of additional public open space within the city. As far as utilities went, we kind of reworked some of the recommendations to be a little bit broader. So the first is to explore defining pervious pavement and researching best practices to encourage the use of pervious pavement. And then second, consider investigating ways to encourage, require, or incentivize best management practices and the use of alternative energy resources on all types of property within the city. So are there any questions for me on how we got to that list or what exactly is within there?
I guess I have a question. last time you presented this, I asked that you make available to us the things you were dropping out. And I don't think I ever saw that in any fashion. So let me re-ask.
So the only two recommendations that we're dropping are the ones at the bottom of this worksheet. The one about accessory dwelling units, it's being dropped from LPC's plate and being put instead on the short-term housing committee. And then second, stricter regulations within the historic zone. Again, that we didn't get much feedback on it, and instead, LPC already works with H Park, so just continuing that relationship to monitor.
Again, I asked what you were dropping out from the public meeting. Go back to that and please make it available. It's a reasonable request. It's data that you have. Please at least send me a copy.
Okay.
Savannah, are you clear on what's being asked? Or
I can go back to the PowerPoint and highlight on the PowerPoint that was presented last time, but it is just these two recommendations.
No, let's go back to the bulletin boards you had at the workshop meeting where you got public input and you got some scoring. This did well, that did not do well. And I'd like to see what, a matrix or a data or all the dots, please.
Okay. Yeah, we can develop a matrix.
Savannah, this list, my understanding had been that this list was in fact the items that were voted on at the public meeting. That is, that list, with the exception of the two that aren't moving forward, is that list.
I understand that.
But you're asking for how many people voted each way? Or,
Well, I had to ask it the third time, so yes.
okay.
I'd like to see the data. Okay, and I guess secondly, I have a concern that while this is the list that seems to go forward, it really doesn't address some of the city's bigger issues that probably should fall in the Planning Commission's bailiwick.
Can we, if we can get this list to you, because I think the slideshow had the numbers of people voting.
Yeah, it did. I'm asking what got dropped out.
I think it's just those two, though.
It's just
Is
those
that
two. We
correct?
took.
That's what I understood.
That's correct.
Well, to pick an example, rain barrels were in there.
Yes. So a couple, not a subcommittee, just a couple people got together of the commission with staff and Savannah after that meeting, and then they tweaked those groups. So the one that says consider investigating ways to encourage number 13 on the list of utilities, instead of just calling out a separate item for rain barrels in solar and wind, they were all combined into one category, just in case we forgot something or there was something else. So we didn't pigeonhole the city into just looking at those specific items. The group made it a broader category. So they didn't get dropped, they just got reworded and retweaked into a different recommendation that was more encompassing of other best management practices.
Is there some problem with seeing the data?
Well, there's no data on that. That was just a couple of committee members getting together and discussing that, and that's where this came from.
Is there
But-
some problem with seeing the raw data?
I think the confusion is, I think we've seen the raw data, and that's the confusion.
I'd like to see it again.
Okay.
And I'd like to see the things that got dropped.
Okay, again, the only two that got dropped are the items 1 and 2 on the list that was in the packet, but we can get you back that PowerPoint presentation. I believe the PowerPoint presentation is on the city's website under the 5-year comp plan, so you can see all of that and see how it was scored. If you're looking for the exact dots,
I am.
let me see, let me double check
there
the
are
website real
photos.
quick.
I
I think there were photos.
recall seeing photos of the dots. So if we can get to Bob the list of the items that people voted on, the summary that says how many voted, it was red, green, and yellow, okay? And then also, if you have the photos of the boards that were taken, then, because then it would be good, Bob, for you to come back if you think there's something missing. And at this point, I'd also be concerned just to know, are we missing any big items that didn't get on a board? This is our last chance,
Well, I
this
think
is
sea
one of our
level
last
rise
chances
is
to do it,
probably
so.
that, but that's why I asked the question.
So on the website, under the 5-year comp plan update, is the PowerPoint presentation that broke down based on the number of dots that's on the city's website. So, and there that is what that looks like.
Can you
So
go to a
if you
page
can
that would
scroll
show it?
through
Because
please.
I'd like to just be sure that we're getting
the right information.
information to you, so this is our chance to
Just
get it
keep
right, so.
scrolling slowly.
Keep going.
Keep going. Keep going. I think you want to get to
Get to one of
Page-
the items, yeah.
the 7 or 8, or yeah,
Here
there
we
you
go.
go.
Okay,
We're
here
talking
we
about
go.
housing. So the one that is, again, as Savannah stated, is come off is number 1. And again, I think that's because there is currently a short-term housing rentals ad hoc committee currently working on that. So I think we were going to let them run with that instead of us kind of preempting work they're currently looking at as what accessory dwelling units is going on. So we were going to, allow for that to evolve naturally, because that's something coming in. And I think the other 3, the wording got revised slightly for the housing. So if we look at, for the housing items, let me look. Yep, there's still proposed 3 different ones. I think the wording just changed slightly, but the meat and the intent is all still there.
I think it would be good to see, because,
Yep.
I mean, when you showed the housing, we have pretty long sentences there, and
Yes.
here we have a bullet. If we can just see the crosswalk over to
Yep.
them, that would help.
And just going back to
Yeah.
the ex-elementary teacher in me, there has to, I'm sure somebody just took photos.
Yeah, I'm
Wouldn't
sure
that
they
be
did
the
too.
easiest way to just look at the photos? And then we could see if there were any comments, because people don't always follow directions at these workshops. And even though you're only supposed to do the stickers, I think people might have written some comments on there. And just to use our due diligence, that would be,
Savannah captured all the comments and
That's what I thought.
in the PowerPoint presentation that was provided. So after she went through the 4 questions and with the number of dots for each category, then she provided the
Janelle, I'm not
comments.
questioning that.
No,
or-
no,
I'm just asking if anybody took any pictures of it.
yeah, we usually do, and I know
Right,
Savannah
that's what I
did,
thought.
so, okay, we'll get
We
the
have
photos.
pictures of every board that I'm happy to send over to you all.
Easy. There we go.
Okay. Any other questions for Savannah on this?
If I may, Savannah, what's our next step?
So we were hoping tonight to have this list of recommendations recommended, sorry for being redundant, but to mayor and city council for approval as well. If you guys don't feel comfortable recommending those tonight, I can provide you all with the pictures as well as the list of all the comments that we received from the public workshop for you all to review over the next month, and we can come back to this next month and then recommend it to mayor and city council.
Well, what would that do to our schedule?
It puts us behind about a month.
Yeah, I think luckily
We had a little built-in, I think, but.
we were about a month ahead of schedule right now. We do need to, after mayor and city council approve it, then go in for plus review with the state. So that is something that we can't get too far behind on. But like I said, within our schedule right now, we have, refining these with LPC. So I would consider that part of refinement.
Savannah, if we, and we'll see how the commissioners feel about this, whether they feel ready to put them forward or not. But if they went forward and after doing a more fine-tuned review of some of these, if one of the commissioners has some comments or ideas that they want to add in. What would be the format for doing that? Because it seems like we're still early in the process. This wouldn't be, like, we're not about to put forward, however many sentences, 14, whatever number we have here, that's the final. So there's still plenty of opportunity, I would expect, to make changes.
Yeah, before we adopt the addendum, there are opportunities to make changes. It helps with us if we do have, a general idea of what we're working towards, but there are still opportunities.
And there's still, of course, be opportunities to provide those comments to mayor and council, and then there will be a public hearing. So there's still a lot of public comment time. It's just-
Is anyone prepared to make a motion to put these forward to city council?
I feel very comfortable making a motion to forward these recommendations to city council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I should have said proposed by Melanie, seconded by Tom. Any discussion before we vote? Okay. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, so we have one nay and one abstention, and the rest ayes. Did you get a count? Okay, so
Sorry, I was
move
just-
forward. Okay.
Doing the math.
Excuse me, it's Jackie.
Oh, hi, Jackie.
Hi, I did not hear who voted no.
Jackie is the person doing the minutes, everybody.
Oh.
Different Jackie. Jackie's the one who does our minutes.
I didn't hear who voted no to that motion.
Bob Heffernan voted no, and Deborah
Okay.
Evalds
And
abstained.
Deborah abstained?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
And
we'll call
who
out the
second-
names
I
now.
didn't hear who seconded.
Tom Jensen seconded the
Oh,
motion.
okay.
Sorry.
And I just have a question. It's hard for me to see everyone that's there. I see Mr. Jensen's there. Is Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
He's sitting next
Mr.
to
Ennis?
Glenn.
Mr. Ennis?
Yes.
He's sitting
And
next to.
I can't see who's sitting across from Janelle. The picture is cut off.
That is Tom Owen. He's the BPW liaison.
Oh, Mr. Owen. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Jackie, but we'll try to do a better job of calling out the names for you as we go through.
That's okay. I don't know why the picture is just cut off there, but
Okay.
I see Mr. Owen now.
Okay.
He was trying to hide.
You'll have to move over closer to Rich if you want to be in the screen here. Okay. Any other announcements? And could you explain what the actual next step will be for our committee now after it goes to mayor and city council? Savannah?
Sure. So after we present to mayor and city council, then I'll bring back any public comments that we received during that presentation as well. I'm also working at this time with BPW to get an update. So I will present updated figures from BPW as well next, just on rates that they're utilizing currently, so that we have updated figures for this addendum.
Thank you.
And just for.
And tomorrow I will send to Janelle all of the photos from the public workshop as well as those comments once again.
And I will do my best to get them on the comp plan website by the end of the week. You're welcome.
We'll move on to new business. And the item that we, I should mention before we move on, in an earlier version of the agenda, we had an item C2 that involved confirmation of reports and possible scheduling of a public hearing regarding S-1-22 Roosevelt Landing, a major subdivision, et cetera, okay? And that has come off of the agenda because we had some issues in terms of the public signage and notification around it. So it will be on the agenda at our next meeting. So in the July meeting, we'll be seeing that one again. So now we'll move on to D, new business, and D1. This is a discussion and possible recommendation to mayor and city council regarding a minor subdivision, MS-2-22, for the lands of Galasso, thank you, located at 111 New Road. The minor subdivision is to create one new parcel of land with a residual parcel. The property is zoned R2, SCTM :335-4, 18-75 .00. Janelle, would you like to take us through an overview of this? And I thought what we'd do with each of these is we get the overview from Janelle, we'll have a chance for all of the commissioners to ask any questions, and then if we can entertain a motion that we then discuss, okay?
All right, thank you. So again, this is an application for a minor subdivision. The property is located on New Road, and it also abuts University Drive, so it's a through lot, so it has frontage on two different roads. So the applicant is requesting a minor subdivision to subdivide the back half that's located on University into a brand-new lot, and then have the house that it is on a smaller parcel. The minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet, and the lot depth is 100 feet in depth. This application did go to the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment did grant two variances. One was to allow for one of the lots to be 9,342 square feet, and to allow for the lot depth to be 99.38 feet. So the Board of Adjustment did grant those. So if the subdivision is approved, minor subdivision is approved, both lots are now in compliance with the zoning because of the variances that were granted. So the new subdivision would again be located off of University Road. The Lewes Board of Public Works has indicated they have the ability to serve the property. That was provided in an email from the Assistant General Manager, Robin Davis, and that was included in the packet. The property is not located in the floodplain. There are no wetlands. There are no environmental issues known with this application. So again, it's just for a minor subdivision to add one new lot off of University. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commissioners?
I have a simple one. On the site plan, it shows the name Galasso to the left. Do the applicants also own the properties to the left of the site?
They do.
They do. I'm just curious. All right, thank you.
Janelle, will the lot with the existing house meet the coverage requirements?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Yes, it's 65%. So it does meet and again, the one outbuilding is proposed to be removed, so it actually will help the lot coverage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to ask a procedural question. So, the lot has been approved by the Board of Adjustment, the variance. But the table of zoning is also clear for R2, and I'd just like some explanation about how that works, how it comes to us as not a question, as more of a procedural step to rubber stamp at this point, is not whether or not we feel that it's appropriate to downsize lots. Am I making myself clear on that?
You are.
Okay.
So just think of it as, the Board of Adjustment is the only body that has the ability to adjust the zoning code, make changes to it, and they've made a change to the zoning code specific to this property. So basically, you take the table that's in the code and put it aside, and the Board of Adjustment has created a new table for you for this particular lot. I've seen it in a lot of jurisdictions where the Planning Commission feels a little bit sided because the Board of Adjustment did something to adjust the code before it gets to you. But all I can say is that it's completely legal. There's a standard that the Board of Adjustment is supposed to apply that says, given these circumstances, is it appropriate for us to adjust the code? And if that legal standard is met, then they grant the variance, and you should treat it as if the table has been revised and it is what it is.
It's just,
I understand.
yeah, it's a little concerning to me, only because in this particular neighborhood, as you move north, you have a lot of lots that are 90 by 180. Mm-hmm. And here, it's actually, I guess, a slight bit larger than that, or is it, actually? 94 by total depth is 206. So it's, it's comparable. And I guess my concern is if we start dividing up lots that are on the zoning code, they're supposed to be 10,000 square feet, into lots that are smaller than 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, I completely hear you. All I can say is that, a denial would not be appropriate based upon the lot size being smaller than 10,000 square feet, because the Board of Adjustment has already said that that has been revised for this particular property. I totally understand the hesitancy and the way it feels kind of like things got ahead of you before it got to you. I've seen it in a lot of jurisdictions, but in this instance, you have to treat it as though a 9,342 square foot lot is legal, conforming to the code.
It's a little confusing, but it's okay. We learn every day on these commissions, and
Yeah.
this is one of those times, I guess. The other,
By the way, I've also seen it happen where the applicant will come to the Planning Commission first, and the Planning Commission will say, well, we'll grant the subdivision if the Board of Adjustment gives you a variance. Then the Board of Adjustment says the same thing. They say, well, wait a minute, it came to us. Now we feel like we're pressured to grant the variance because the Planning Commission said it's okay if we give a variance. So it kind of, I've seen it happen both ways, and every time the body that it comes to second feels like they, something got ahead of them. So it's just something that's built into the system that isn't entirely perfect, but.
We prefer the other scenario, of course, Glenn.
Yeah.
But you explained it well. And Janelle, if I may, excuse me, Deb, there's nothing else per code that is unusual or that's not allowed, unfortunately.
No.
Unfortunately, once again, we stand here and rubber stamp things so we can build more houses. That's all we do. We all know
Again, it's a minor subdivision for one lot.
Yeah.
It complies with the zoning code, and it complies with the land use. So it is an appropriate use of the zoning.
Madam Chair, the applicant and the applicant's
Attorney
representative is
are here.
if you want to hear from them.
Any other questions? Is someone ready to entertain a motion?
I would make a motion that we approve the minor subdivision of this lot.
Moved by Melanie Moser. Is there a second?
Remember, it's just a recommendation to council.
Recommendation. Do we have to identify the lot?
No, we've
Now we know what
identified it.
agenda we're on.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so seconded by Joe Hockner. Any discussion?
Just procedurally, it's a recommendation to council as per usual.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, we do not make final,
Yeah.
we only make recommendations to city council. We don't make final decisions here.
yeah, I would like to make some comments. We're not voting yet, correct?
No, this is discussion on the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
I would approve of the motion because it was already approved by the Board of Adjustment. However, I think that this parcel, this section of land at the beginning of New Road between Pilot Town and 4th Street is potentially problematic. There are some other lots in there that don't seem to meet present code, if I'm not mistaken, that are narrow and long. And it's also just very congested. I think the positive thing about this subdivision is that it's going to be exiting on University Drive. I would be probably voting against recommending this if this was flipped. Because getting in and out, I'm sure, is concerning for those homeowners. But I think we need to look very carefully at what is happening in that very high congested little pocket there on both sides of the street, and not, let things casually, be whittled down, because that's what I would call this. As Tom said, rubber stamping so that more houses can be built. But we're not making a great big change. We're whittling it down a little. But, and Janelle, I know you pointed out it was one lot. It is one lot. But when we whittle down a lot of one lots, it becomes a lot of land and a lot more houses. So that would be my discussion there.
Any other comments or discussion? Shall we vote? And we need to vote individually, and you need to state, well, you can explain.
Right, so it'll be an individual vote. You can state the reasons why you're voting the way you're voting. Sometimes typically, code compliance, consistency with comprehensive development plan, other things that you might think are appropriate in this instance. If you're voting yes, if you're voting no, of course, not compliant with the comprehensive plan, whatever, You can also rely upon each other's votes. So if you think Deborah says some things are particularly compelling for the reasons stated by Deborah Evalds, I also vote. So, thank you.
Melanie Moser?
I would vote in favor of sending this to the council and recommending approval based on the fact that it does comply with the regulations. It has received a Board of Adjustment ruling, and it is just one lot. And it as Deborah was saying, that new lot will come out on a less congested road than New Road.
Bob Hefferman?
I think echoing what Deborah said about the lot and the traffic and the exit onto University, but I'm going to abstain because there's nothing to decide for this committee.
Rich Innes?
I support the decision to send this to mayor and city council for the reasons that Melanie stated. I think this is another example of where we really need to dig into the real meat of the zoning ordinances and codes if we are going to make an impact on development within our jurisdiction. And I think as written, this is by the code, and but I think we're already beginning the work, thanks to our new chair, of revisiting the underlying issue here. But I'm going to vote in this case in favor of forwarding this.
Tom Jensen?
I'm going to abstain for the reasons articulated by Commissioner Heffernan and kind of the policy issues that Commissioner Evalds has articulated as well. Thank you.
Deborah Evalds?
I am also going to abstain because we didn't really have anything to decide here.
Jonathan Sharp?
I'll vote in favor of it for the reasons that others have expressed, because it does fit the code.
Joe Hockner?
I'll be voting in favor of it. Like it's been said, it's only one lot. It's not going to break the bank. It's not the end of the world. And people move here because the traffic is so light. Thank you.
I'll be voting in favor of it for the reasons stated earlier. It meets the code requirements, and because they have gotten the Board of Adjustment ruling, I feel I need to vote in favor.
The motion approved 5-0 to 3. So 5 in favor, 0 in opposition, and 3 abstentions.
Right.
Okay.
You need a quorum of actual votes, and you had a quorum of
With
actual
quorum,
votes.
yeah.
Yep. So the recommendation is approved.
Okay. Thank you to the homeowners and your representative also for being present. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to D2, which is the presentation and possible recommendation to Mayor and City Council regarding a request to reduce a landscape buffer for a parcel of land located within the Jefferson Court subdivision, address 12 Jefferson Court, SCTM:335-8.01-74.00. Janelle?
So this is a unique request. This is a request to allow for a reduction in the landscape buffer for lot number 1 in the Jefferson Court subdivision. When the Jefferson Court subdivision was approved back in 2007, as part of the approval, there was a landscape buffer, a 10-foot landscape buffer required around the entire perimeter of the development, so all 4 sides, and that landscape buffer was placed on the individual properties. This instance and the properties along this side of Jefferson Court are actually all considered through lots because they front on both Jefferson Court and Freeman Highway, so they have 2 front yard setbacks. So what this applicant is requesting, in their letter, they consider this the rear yard. That's how this functions for them, is at their rear yard. However, unfortunately, it is per zoning, their front yard as another front yard setback. So what they're asking for is to reduce, they'd like to do a deck off their backyard, and what they want to do is be able to encroach into that 10-foot landscape buffer. So they are looking for consideration if the planning commission and then mayor and council would allow for a reduction in that landscape buffer for several feet, for allow them to utilize their property. And that is what the request is for. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
How many feet exactly could you say for the, I thought it was 5. but-
I think they want a 4-foot reduction, so there would be 6 feet left.
Okay. 4 feet, okay.
So it would be a 6-foot wide landscape buffer instead of the 10-foot on this lot. They've only asked for this lot because they haven't talked to their other neighbors, but this lot.
It is not, if I look at that part of Freeman Highway, there's a big wood fence through there, is there not?
I believe the DRBA has a fence on on their property in the right-of-way.
Yeah, and there's Freeman Highway, and there's a ditch and some land, and then there's a fence. So it'll only be them extending out into their essentially backyard up towards that fence. Is that correct?
Well, the fence is not on the property line. I think the fence is somewhere farther beyond.
On DRBA,
So what
yeah.
they want to do is, if you look at the survey, you can see that they have a 15-foot front yard setback. They're looking to encroach into there. By the way, this one will also have to go to the Board of Adjustment if this does get recommended approval, because they'd also be encroaching into the front yard setback more than the code allows, potentially.
Coming to you first.
Yeah, this one's coming to you first, because this one they're looking, I figured this one's going to be easier, potentially. So we flipped this one is, they, depending on how big their proposed deck is, they might actually need a variance to further encroach into the front yard setback because there's limitations. But right now, there are no trees here. They did not realize this was a landscape buffer and took down the trees. They are replanting them. They are aware of that, and they know that. So for all openness, but they will be doing that. But again, to them, they did not realize it was a through lot. They thought this was their backyard. They didn't realize the buffer was on their property. So they're just looking to reduce the buffer by 4 feet to allow for a 6-foot landscape buffer.
I think we would urge all homeowners and landowners to truly look at your, the recorded plan. And one thing that we've looked at is the having buffers not on the personal property, and having buffers with markings so that people do not encroach on them. But there is a responsibility for the homeowner to actually check the recorded plan, so.
Yes, or to get a survey, which is, I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but as a property owner, certainly it was the first thing that I did purchasing properties. I do have a question. It would be very helpful if we had some photographs. I'm having a difficult time seeing how this all lays out. I'm looking at the map. You can see only the fence when you look at from Freeman Highway, and you can't actually see.
Blue, can you bring up like Google Earth or Google Maps and we can get an overview of that, please?
I actually do have it, but you're saying that what we're looking at on Google Maps isn't accurate. I have that on my.
Well, again, the aerial is maybe a couple years old. It depends on. It's not always the most up to date, like within the last 6 months.
Right.
For that, because again, we've been working with this property owner for a couple of months, trying to find them a path forward.
Because what I'm looking at here is, it's quite easy to see, street view, I don't know, sure they'll show the same thing. But what I'm looking at, you said that trees were removed, is that correct?
Yeah, but most recently.
Right.
So depending on how old the aerial is, there may not be trees, there might be older trees.
Well, what the
there might
street
be no
view here
trees.
shows.
No house.
No, I'm actually on the street view from Freeman Highway. So
Yeah.
I'm seeing the back of the house. That may be more helpful.
I don't know what Freeman Highway is.
No, you're not seeing it right. I live across the street from this house.
Okay, so which, am I looking on the wrong
walked over there
side?
this afternoon, and that's,
We live, Jefferson Court comes in.
That's what I thought. Is it the house with all
And it
the,
dead ends, right at our entrance to our garage.
it's the house with all the green trees, correct, that are no
Now
longer
you're
there?
looking at it from Freeman Highway.
That was my point, because that's what I'm looking at. Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I was saying. So the trees that we're seeing here are no longer here, is that?
Some of them may be, but a number of them were removed, and they will be replanting trees.
Obviously not replanting them where a deck is. Okay.
Correct.
can't-
Again, that's why they're asking for a reduction. If they have 6 feet, they still have room to allow for trees to be planted, because typically we see like about 5 feet in between, for street trees, we typically see 3 to 5 feet for the grass space between the curb and the sidewalk for trees. So what they're asking for instead of 10 feet is 6 feet to replant the trees. So yeah, sometimes, again, this is from, I think it says 2018, 19 is when the street view was taken. So again, it's several years out of date, and that happens. They're not driving by every day, which is unfortunate.
I have a question for Janelle. Landscape buffers don't seem to be in the code anywhere. Was this imposed by the Planning Commission at the time?
So I think this was either imposed by the Planning Commission or because it's along Freeman Highway, that it would have been a requirement for the plan. But for the entire subdivision, this 10-foot buffer goes all the way around the entire subdivision for a landscape buffer. So I'm based on that. For the rest of it, they probably placed it, it was a condition of approval. And then typically you would see some type of, for newer subdivisions, a buffer along Freeman Highway because it's Freeman Highway. Because it's a corridor buffer.
I realize that our role is to review what people have applied for and not to redesign their plans. There are 2 notches, in a sense, out of the back of the house where one could potentially build a deck. I assume
That has been brought
that
to
isn't
their
the preference
attention,
of the.
and this is their request.
Okay.
I also wanted to clarify, because I was a little confused when I was hearing that what is going on in the front here? Is this relevant? Did I also hear that there is an encroachment in the front, or what?
No, the front's fine.
So,
Are you looking at the porch? I'm wondering.
Porches are allowed to encroach
Yes.
front yard setback
Yes.
10 feet. So
perhaps I misunderstood something during your presentation when you were explaining it to
So,
us.
and they want to put a deck on the back, and they're
Yes.
looking at,
That was all
a
clear.
little bit wider deck that may need a variance that might go beyond 10 feet. So that might actually then need to go to the Board of Adjustment for relief, depending on how big this deck is proposed. The one on the other side off of Jefferson is fine. It's what they want to put on Freeman Highway is the problem, because we have another front yard setback that they have to maintain. And again, the house is set back farther from Jefferson Court than it is from Freeman Highway. It's about, I would say maybe, it's 1.5 feet, yeah, off their building restriction line. So it doesn't leave them a whole lot of room to play with that. And then again, they have that 10-foot landscape buffer that you're not allowed to build within. Yes.
Presumably, the Board of Adjustment looks favorable on these kind of requests, Glenn, or?
So
Janelle, or-
the Board of Adjustment's going to look at this, if, again, depends on how this goes, based on a number of criteria. The State Supreme Court created 4 different criteria that most municipalities and counties in the state follow. It's called the quick check. So there are criteria that the applicant has to meet to be able to be granted a variance. And the city of Lewes even has some additional criteria to be granted a variance. So each property is looked individually based on the merits of its case.
What would examples be of those criteria? Because I think we're spending some time today thinking of the Board of
Well,
Adjustment versus.
Think of it this way, part of the quick check test, so quick check comes from a case, it was Quick Check Realty versus something in Newcastle County. And quick, by the way, is spelled Kwick. If you're trying to look it up, it's not a Q. So they basically said it's a little bit of a balancing test, which you say, what is the harm to the applicant who's applying to this, and is it outweighed by the harm to the neighbors if the variance is granted? So who's suffering the greater harm? Generally, QuickCheck says if the applicant's harm is going to be worse if you deny it, then will be the harm to the neighbors. If you grant it, then it should be granted. But the factors they look at, and it's the standard is called the QuickCheck standard, but the legal term is an exceptional practical difficulty. So they'll look at things like the unique characteristics of the land itself, the lot itself. Is this lot somehow uniquely plotted, uniquely arranged or configured that creates an exceptional practical difficulty in building whatever you're trying to build? Look at that. They'll look at, of course, the character of the neighborhood around and what's the harm to the neighbors. So there is a legal standard they're supposed to go through, and some boards are very rigorous about it. Lewis's board has become more and more rigorous about the legal standard and applying it. So I think it'd be unfair to say that the Board of Adjustment just haphazardly kind of hands these out. Certainly.
I think a good reference is, I think the Board of Adjustment had one application last year, and they've only had 2 this year. So it's not something that they're handing out variances left and right. They don't even meet monthly. I mean, they haven't met, I think the last time they met was for the Galassos. I think they've had 2, they now have 3 applications, and it's June. So they're not meeting all that often.
That's helpful background. Thank you both. Go ahead.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I want to go back to something that Janelle just said, and it was that the problem is that the backyard is considered, a front yard. And personally, I've lived in a property that had this exact scenario, but I had 2 or 3 front yards. It was crazy. However, not here in the city of Lewes, fortunately. Yeah, it was beyond a corner. It was irregular on a corner. Anyway, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem, as I interpret it, is homeowners purchased a property. I don't know, how long they've held that property, but did not fully consider what was permitted use for that property. And I don't see that as a problem with the law or a problem with the orientation of the lot. I see it as a problem with the homeowner's desire to build larger than what they are permitted under code. And I think when we are on a slippery slope, when we start just, okay, well, it's only 1. It's just a little. And that's where my concern is here.
Yeah, would it make sense for us to have the Board of Adjustment rule on this before we did anything?
Well, I think because they've come to us, it's incumbent on us to make a decision. Is that correct, Glenn? I mean,
That's right. I mean, under the code, you're obligated to dispense with this
Yeah.
application one way or the other.
is anyone ready to, do we have a motion?
And again, I think the owner is here perhaps, and if you want to hear from them.
I don't see them.
I don't see
They
them.
were
No, I'm
noticed.
sorry. Okay.
I did email them.
Okay.
And there's no requirement that you take public comment on this, but you're allowed to if you.
Oh, I think they've got a hand up, so they are
Okay.
attending via Zoom. That, it's going to be up to the commission if they want to take comment from the property owner. So I've got a nodded yes, so please promote them, Blue. Thank you.
I think you're muted. If you could unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lara Hawke. It's nice to meet you all.
Thanks. Just want to make sure she can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Proceed.
Carry on, yeah.
I did make some comments. I wasn't sure if you were able to see them, but I wanted to make sure it was clear that 2 things. When we purchased the property, the survey that we had as part of the purchase didn't actually show the landscape buffer. That was the first challenge. Secondly, that the trees were removed due to them actually pushing the fence. They got so big over the years that they were actually encroaching and damaging the fence. And I think you can almost see that actually from the picture of the map view when it was on the screen. So I just wanted to make sure you were clear on that. And obviously happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Can you tell us why the deck cannot be located elsewhere? There, as someone noted, there are two corners notches out of the house, and the deck could easily fit perhaps within those notches?
So the back door that goes out of the house, there are several steps down, and we wanted to just put the deck immediately at the bottom of those steps so that it was, attached to the house and nice and neat and just running along the back. And only 10 foot deep, basically. So not a huge deck, but just something that would allow us to use that space at the back. At the moment, we just have the front garden, and that's our sort of private area at the back. So we were just hoping to utilize that as our other neighbours have done. So that was the plan. I was a little bit confused about that area that you mentioned because that was really the only option we saw, was just to put it straight along the back. If we put it further down, it wouldn't be attached to the exit of the house, if that makes sense.
But there could be a walkway from the back of the house, from the door at the rear, to a deck either to the left or right.
Yeah, I mean, we hadn't discussed that with Janelle. I didn't actually realize that was an option.
So when we discussed
we just went with this proposal to go from the doorway, a slim deck running along the back of the house. We talked about other options of constructing the deck so it wasn't a permanent structure, but not other locations.
So we did discuss it, and there was concern about the small kids only having a narrow area to walk and run and then get around to the side of the house. I remember that was your concern about just doing something slim and narrow off the steps, because then the kids would then maybe jump down off the deck, and it would be narrow for the kids to then get to the larger area for the deck for them to play. That's my recollection of the conversation.
Gotcha. Yes, so I'm on the same page. So really the depth of it was, if we had it too narrow, we've got young kids, 5 and 9. As they're coming out, it's almost like it wouldn't really make much sense because it would be too shallow with the restrictions. So we just wanted to go out a couple more feet just to make it more usable, basically, and not actually a hazard, but more usable as an area.
Well, you would have 6 feet clear before the landscape buffer to run a walk. And that's not a narrow walk. I mean, 6 foot wide is plenty wide for movement. And I guess what I don't see is, when I'm used to people asking for variances like this, is that there's some kind of hardship. And I don't see that there is a hardship here.
This isn't a hardship.
Yeah. So Janelle's comment is this isn't, a hardship test is typically something you see under the Board of Adjustment, so it's not really a hardship analysis that you're doing. This is a request for a plan modification, so I think the analysis you should be doing is, sort of, for some reason that landscape buffer was required when it was approved, so it's serving some function. Is it continuing to serve that? Is there a need for that landscape buffer to continue? And if there is, then perhaps you leave it in place. If you don't see there a currently or a continuing need for that buffer, then it might be appropriate for a waiver.
Or in this case, for it to continue, but in a lesser dimension.
Okay, Rich next, and then Deborah, will you?
Just on that point, Glenn, which I think it's sort of the principle here, which is that these buffers are designed to take runoff from impervious surfaces, in this case Freeman Highway, and filter it. And so it can absorb into the ground and just lessen the impacts of that on water quality and everything else. In addition to trees and shrubbery, having a positive impact on carbon sequestration, So that's sort of the principle of having that kind of a buffer around this land. And we had a big discussion about this, during our debate over the code that was just put in, and looking at, what is going on with, with buffers in general when we revisited the subdivision. So that, to me, is the principle. The question here is whether this would make much of a difference. There still is going to be a buffer. It would just be smaller than it would otherwise be, and so that, to me, is the question before us now, to grant an exception for this particular instance, but keep the principle in mind here. I know that's.
Deborah?
Yes, my question is for the homeowner. I'm just following up on the comment that was typed in about the survey or the plat that was shown at the time of purchase did not show a setback. And I was just wondering if you could clarify that a little. What we're looking at here, which tax map number 335 8.12 parcel 74 does show it.
Let me go to Janelle, because I think she can give us a good explanation of the difference between a survey that you might have done and the recorded plan.
So the recorded plan is going to show that, and then this actually survey was not provided by the applicant. I pulled this from the building permit for the house, so it was shown when the house was built. Again, they purchased the property, so I don't know what their survey shows, but I know a previous survey did show it, and the record plan does show it. But I'm going to admit, not all surveyors are going to pick up and note all the easements, and sometimes there's just a blanket easement along properties. In this instance, there's a landscape buffer, but sometimes there's just a blanket easement along the front, side, and rear property lines that's noted on the record plan, but it's not actually shown on the survey because it's just a note on the record plan. So it's quite possible that all of our houses lots actually have easements on the front, side, and rear. They're not going to show up an easement on a survey because you'd have to do title research and you'd have to actually look at the record plan you'd have to look at the note on the record plan.
Right.
In this instance, the record plan did show it, and then the permit for the house did show it. I cannot speak to the survey that they obtained.
And
That's the importance of looking at the record plan.
And I guess my question
that's
is then that if there was an application put in, it must have been submitted with a sketch of where the deck was proposed, correct, on a survey?
I think they submitted, and I don't think we actually formally took it because we caught this.
Okay.
We caught the fact that there was a landscape buffer, and the trees had been, again, impacting the fence, so they'd been removed, and that there was then an encroachment into the buffer. So I'm not sure if we even accepted. I know there was talk with one of the assistant building officials. I apologize, he's not here tonight, because then he brought me in, and I met with the family, the entire family, and we bounced off different ideas, and this is the option that the homeowners have come forward with, is to ask for a reduction of 4 feet in the landscape buffer.
Any other questions or discussion?
And I'm also going to note, I know how to read a survey. Not everybody knows how to read a survey and understands all the lines on surveys. That doesn't alleviate somebody not knowing, but, this is what I do for a living, so I know exactly what every line on this plan means, but not everybody does.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion?
I would put forth a motion to deny based on, I think that this is in this particular subdivision, there is not a lot of wiggle room at the rear of these properties. It's pretty tight, and the homes are mostly built, being familiar with Jefferson Court, to the maximum dimensions. And I don't feel a need here. I'm hearing a want, not a need.
Okay, moved by Deborah Evalds. Is there a second?
I would second that.
Seconded by Melanie Moser. Discussion? Are we ready to vote?
I
So
just
go
have
ahead. Yeah,
one
please.
comment that I think it's that good old slippery slope, to start granting something here and then the next one that comes, again, where is the hardship? Where is the need? And I think there are alternatives that could be designed here to fulfill the need for a deck. And I would be less concerned if it was the landscape buffer along the west side, but it's the landscape buffer that's directly against the highway. So that has the most noise, the most, bad things associated with it. So that is why I would support the denial.
Let's vote, and again, please indicate the reason for your vote. And if you agree with someone earlier, you can echo their reasons.
To clarify, a vote of positive means we're voting against it.
That's right. You vote to support the denial.
Denial, right.
Okay, exactly.
Can I read for you before you vote the section of code that applies here, just so you have just a
Yes,
framework?
please.
So this is under 170-7. It says unusual conditions where an applicant shows that strict compliance with the requirements of this chapter would result in extraordinary hardship. So hardship is used in this language. Extraordinary hardship to the applicant or to the city's objectives because of conditions which are self-imposed by the applicant, or conditions exist which would result in inhibiting the achievement of the objectives of these provisions. The mayor and city council may vary, modify, or waive the requirements so that substantial justice may be done and the public interest secured, provided, and then it goes on with some other stuff. But that's kind of the framework of what you should be thinking about when you vote.
Okay. Melanie?
Yes, I support the denial, again, for the reasons that I stated earlier, and this, I think it's a self-imposed hardship.
Bob?
I'll support the denial. I think there are options that may achieve the same thing, particularly on the side.
Joe?
I'm voting against the denial. I believe everybody should have a deck, and the fact that there's a fence along there, nobody in their right mind, unless they're a peeping Tom, is going to see over the fence, and I think the homeowners deserve a deck.
Rich?
I oppose the denial for the same reasons that Joe indicated. I think the principle here is an important one, but I think that this, 4 feet is fairly minimal given this circumstance, and children involved that would benefit from a deck, and I don't think it would materially or significantly impact the neighborhood. So that's why.
Tom?
I vote in favor of the motion, which I believe
It's a denial.
supports the denial for some of the reasons articulated by Melanie and the whole slippery slope issue we have here, where it appears there are options, frankly, that aren't other options that aren't being pursued.
Deborah?
I support the denial, support the motion. I just think we have a zoning code for a reason, and we need to stop bending it.
Jonathan?
Same reason I support the denial, because I think we need to not make exceptions to the zoning code without further evaluation of why.
I also support the denial. I think this was a buffer that was placed in the whole community, and I think there is a slippery slope here. I do think it would be possible to have a 4-foot wide, or it could even be slightly wider than that, walkway that would be appropriately fenced or barriered, that you wouldn't fall off of it. And I think we put these landscaped buffers in for a reason. And it's very important that we keep those buffers in terms of water and other issues. So,
And I just want, so the applicant knows, this is just a recommendation to mayor and council. Mayor and council will take this up sometime at their July meeting. And so it was, a motion was upheld 6-2 for a recommendation of denial.
As a comment, I'm going to be really angry if the Board of Adjustment then meets.
There is no application to the Board of Adjustment at this point.
And we thank the homeowner for being present and calling in to answer questions. We appreciate your presence here.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, on to D3, presentation and possible recommendation to mayor and city council regarding a waiver request to eliminate a portion of sidewalk along River Birch Drive within the Lewes Waterfront Preserve Subdivision.
Before we begin, I have to recuse myself.
Thank you, Deborah. Janelle, will you give us an overview of this?
Thank you. So this is a waiver request for elimination of a small portion of the sidewalk within the Lewes Waterfront Preserve development. The development is located off of New Road. The waiver request is actually on the west side of River Birch Drive. So this is the side of the end, it's the dead end section of the road, which is a cul-de-sac that is designed, the right-of-way actually goes all the way to the property line. This is the area that is designed, if the property next door ever develops, that the road would connect through. As the applicant the original developer sold this to the builder has been doing work out there. As they put in the catch basin, they realized there's a ditch on their property that runs about the property line and a little bit over, I think, and they're here to answer the clarification of that, and that there's concern about having to put the sidewalk that close or into the ditch, so they're asking to eliminate a portion of the sidewalk, more or less around the cul-de-sac, and provide a crosswalk much closer in towards the end of, closer to the end of the townhouses for River Birch Road. So as shown on the screen, where the arrow is to the right-hand side, on the left-hand side of the screen, where the circle and then the wide dashed lines, that's where they're proposing to end the sidewalk and to put in the crosswalk, and the remainder of the sidewalk going to the west would be eliminated. They did provide a couple of photos showing the ditch and then showing the placement of the catch basin in location to the ditch. So the catch basin was actually proposed at the end of the road, so then beyond, farther west into the ditch is where the sidewalk would be located. So again, they're just asking for relief from just providing the sidewalk around that edge of the cul-de-sac. And then the applicant is here, and I'm here to answer any questions.
I have a question. How do we prevent cars from driving into the ditch? Is there a railing going up?
So if you recommend approval of this waiver, you could put some type of, that they have to put some type of a sign or jersey barrier. I think there's already supposed to be a sign that says there's a potential for a future road connection there. I think there's a condition of approval for that one, because I try to get that one in when we have.
There's a very large tree.
I just need you at the mic. So I'm gonna turn that one over to the builder. If you want to come
forward,
up and
please.
Introduce yourself,
State
please.
your name, please.
Don't be shy.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Bob Sipple. I am the owner and developer of the subject community project. We had a discussion with the previous applicant about a survey bust. So this is a very good example of a survey bust. So as we commenced with our site work and improvements, we got to the point where we made it to the back rear portion of the project, and we discovered when we staked out the cul-de-sac, the radius, and went to set the catch basin in at the terminus of this cul-de-sac, that there's a very steep slope, and I am accustomed to doing development work down in Sussex County. We come across tax ditches quite frequently. This did not show up on any ditch district map. It didn't show up on the original civil engineer's field survey. So it showed up when we got to that portion of the project and staked it out. This is a page out of the record plan, the approved record plan. The rectangular box depicts the gray hashed line, which is the boundary, the property boundary. And if you could look and discern that property line as planned is up against the back of the proposed sidewalk as the plan was approved. So without any ditch being present, it was always a very constrained area to squeeze a curb and sidewalk in that area. Now with the discovery of this fairly significant ditch, it makes it even more restrictive. So we brought it to the attention of the planning department, the town's engineer. We had a discussion about it a few weeks ago in our monthly progress meeting. And the original response from the original engineer, a civil engineer, the plan was to drop a pipe in, a culvert pipe. That would be quite a feat of engineering because it's a significant ditch. It does serve a purpose. It drains from New Road perpendicular to our property and then continues to run to the property beyond us. I guess that would be southeast of us. It's probably been there for a very, very long time. Our property line, as depicted on this drawing, is about 7 feet behind the back edge of the catch basin that we have installed. Throughout the community, the back of curb calls for a 3-foot strip of grass and then a 5-foot wide section of sidewalk. So if it was a flat surface, we would probably reduce that 3-foot grass buffer behind the curb and squeeze in the 5-foot wide sidewalk and continue right around. The biggest challenge here is, and I took some photos today, they're on my phone and I don't want to get into the technical AV department quite yet. From the back edge of that catch basin to the top of the slope is 48 inches. And then that slope, the bank of the slope starts pretty dramatic.
Will this slope not cause a problem for the road over time? I mean, if there isn't a foundation that's being sunk there just through erosion or other things,
So you have.
is it not? So I had a couple of questions. That's one, and the other one is my understanding was that mayor and city council, when they reviewed this, asked you to change this from a T-turn, if that's the correct terminology, to a circle.
Okay.
And in doing that, you made some changes to where the townhouses were, et cetera. I mean, it seemed to me when you did that, if you knew it was too close, why didn't you, in creating that, why didn't you just move it over so there is plenty of room? Because
That
was the request, I thought, was that you do that.
Practical approach. I purchased the property in August after the plan was already approved. I was not the original applicant for this subdivision. So I'm unfamiliar with all the modifications and revisions that took place during the whole plan approval process. So when we purchased it, our intent was to immediately start the site improvements based on the approved set of construction plans that we acquired.
And how did the survey miss a ditch of this size? I mean, because I believe there's always a plan that shows, that's kind of a topographical view of things.
I believe there should have been.
Okay.
So without being terribly familiar with the civil engineer that was instrumental in this plan. I have had experience with some engineers that love Google Maps, and they love to sit 100 miles away and look at two-dimensional drawings and photos. This would have very, very easily been picked up with an actual field survey, existing conditions survey. So we're requesting.
Or even walking the property
A field
before
survey,
purchasing
yes,
it, yes.
yes, exactly.
I mean, you just have to walk the
So-
boundary line.
So
and you see it.
obviously, I walked the property prior to acquiring it, but nothing was staked out and nothing was boxed in. So it wasn't really discovered until we got back to that section of the road and set our perimeter controls, our silt fence, our stakes.
Do the commissioners have questions for him before we?
I actually have one. Where does the ditch drain? Where does it go?
I would have to look at Google Maps, but I
I think there's a concern, these darn tax ditches
Yeah,
in
it's an
Suffolk
interesting
County are a
system.
mess, and they
Yeah.
really are
Yeah.
not properly.
It looks like it
maintained.
serves several parcels, certainly the parcel adjacent to us, the parcel behind us. And it's fairly broad. It's about 7 feet deep to the bottom of the channel, but it's a good 15 feet across. Our property line is 7 feet beyond the back of the catch basin, which puts it about 3 feet down the slope. So the majority of this ditch is on the adjacent property. So we wouldn't have an opportunity to go onto a neighboring property owner and disrupt us. So with it being a cul-de-sac, I really can't foresee traffic going down there and running into the ditch. There's a street light there. There is a curb. It's block curbing. We just don't have the adequate space to.
Sorry, there's a street light illuminating where this would. okay.
Directly adjacent to the catch basin, yes, ma'am.
Question for you, Madam Chairman, if I may. Thanks for your time, by the way. So, do you have options? I mean, you don't have options you have options that are expensive, obviously, you just
Well,
don't, right? Not being wise. but yeah. Yeah.
So the options, I think the immediate kind of, oops, what do we do now type
Right.
of response was we drop a culvert pipe in and we build it up and install the sidewalk as per plan. But we don't own that property. We don't have enough room behind the back of our curb to extend out because that slope begins at 48 inches behind the curb.
Yeah.
And then our property only extends 7 feet behind the curb, which is down the slope already. Ms. Cornwell mentioned that there is an easement here that's dedicated. If the adjacent property were ever to be developed, it would offer an opportunity for interconnectivity with the streets. At that time, the cul-de-sac would be modified for it to be a through street, and then the sidewalk system could continue uninterrupted. We can bring it up as close as we can get to that radius before we hit that pinch point. But the suggestion was pull the sidewalk back to where the townhomes end, put ramps in and a crosswalk. And the street light stays, all the curbing goes in. It would just be, become like a turf area. So the ditch, whatever purpose it serves, and I'm sure it serves a hefty purpose, would be uninterrupted.
Do you need a sidewalk in there? Are you meeting some regulation or crosswalk?
I don't know about a striped crosswalk, but we would put, for ADA, we would put the domes, the ramps,
Yeah.
on opposite sides of the street where the sidewalk ends. It'll be well lit. There won't be any through traffic. So that's our request. If the request is denied and the determination is that sidewalk has to go in somehow, some way, it would need to involve the adjacent property owner. And then I would be looking for participation from that property owner.
Why would it need to involve the adjacent property owner? Why couldn't you sink in the same way, the same way that we see houses built over water even, and you can sink pylons or supports to support this? Why?
I was thinking a retaining wall.
Yeah.
At the end of your cul-de-sac, do a retaining wall, end your sidewalks at the narrow choke point in front of the last or first two houses, put your crosswalk there, keep your cul-de-sac and build a retaining wall where that slope is now, to keep the street in place, and do that. Money.
A retaining wall would be for what purpose?
To hold up your cul-de-sac so you wouldn't be affected by the slope, and you get your cul-de-sac in place, keep your sidewalks back to end where the first houses start, and put a crosswalk there. Your crosswalk is like 10% into this thing. Move it back to the right where the throat starts leading into your cul-de-sac.
Back to your,
My left, but
towards the end of the cul-de-sac.
Move it over.
yeah, move it over, connect the narrow point of the street.
Yeah, that was our first iteration, I believe.
Yeah.
And then,
Or do you have houses opening up? You don't have lots there, I don't see any lot numbers opening
no,
up into
so
the
that
cul-de-sac.
proposed sidewalk where the two circles and the hash across the street.
It's open space.
We just put the sidewalk extended just beyond the last units on that street. Ended the sidewalk there and put the ramps and the crosswalk. But we can, there's ample room to extend that sidewalk. It's gonna have to end at some point.
Yeah, but
And the closer you bring people on that sidewalk to that ditch, I don't understand.
I don't think the ditch is an attraction, but a retaining
No, I
wall
think it's a
that you wouldn't even see, it'd be under that, under your cul-de-sac to
So-
solid ground, it might work.
So the cul-de-sac's in, the catch basin's in.
Oh, it's all built.
It's already been
Hooray.
inspected, proof rolled, compaction
Sorry.
tested.
I missed that.
It's just, we're laying out curb now, and then behind curb, we would install sidewalk. So there's no integrity.
Why did you put it in when you knew you couldn't put the sidewalk in?
I have to put the cul-de-sac in.
But you also had to put the sidewalk in, that's the requirement, right? So,
what is there today? There's a curb and pavement?
Oh, no, we're not paved yet. We've started boxing the roads, staking out the curb. We're about to put stone down, the stone base for the streets, the internal streets, followed by curb, then base paving. So all of that in the next couple of weeks. And the curb contractor will also be doing the flat work, the sidewalk installation. So it's,
but I haven't heard, why can't you put a strong foundation underneath that edge of the cul-de-sac so that you can build the sidewalk?
if we may, look at some of
Yeah.
the photos of
Okay.
I know there's a ditch there.
We
but-
do have a representative from GMB on behalf of the city. He can answer some of those
Okay.
engineering questions
Okay, good.
So-
to help out.
Yeah, anything can be engineered and built, I'm sure. But that's a good photo there. So the structure, you see the silt fence, you see what I'll call the crab trap that's boxed around the existing catch basin that we just installed. So the back of that catch basin that's boxed in would represent the back of curb. If you come off the back of curb over 4 feet to that red vertical line, that's the top of the slope that starts dramatically descending down into the center of the ditch. So our property line extends another 32 inches behind that red vertical line to just about where that fairly mature tree is. So it gives us just under 7 feet to squeeze a grass strip, sidewalk, and I guess a retaining wall. So it would take filling in that ditch, which would involve the neighboring property, because I can't have a sidewalk, and I think that's your code as well. Usually there's minimum, maximum slopes when you step off the back edge of a sidewalk. You can't just drop off.
Yeah.
Just how much of a reduction in the sidewalk would be realized if this is
So
This is
if
granted.
we go back to that drawing, the diagram,
Or if the sidewalk were right behind the curb,
Yes, exactly, yeah.
you would then
Lose
gain that 4 feet
4
of.
feet, yeah.
so your sidewalks are 5 foot wide, so we still wouldn't have 5 foot wide sidewalk. At most, you'd have a 4 foot wide sidewalk directly behind the curb, behind the catch basin, and then you'd have about a 10 to 12 foot drop off into the ditch.
Oh my gosh, that's a big ditch.
So wait, how could you, I don't understand. I thought the drop-off was happening at the edge of the full sidewalk, and now it's, each time we narrow the sidewalk, the
Well,
drop-off still it seems to be.
Okay, we can go back
like-
to the, no, next, right there. Okay, so I don't have a pointer. So the left side of that photo, you see right there, yes, where that cursor is. That's a wooden box frame that's set around the catch basin that we installed.
And that's street level?
Yes, that catch basin is set at.
The top of it is street level?
Oh, no, that's about 3 feet high. It's just for protection, so, but that 2x4 running across the top of that boxed in enclosure represents the back of the catch basin. From that over to that red vertical line is 4 feet. So you can see what happens when I get 4 feet behind that catch basin. That's the top of the slope.
So typically what would be there is your grass strip.
You have what the plan calls for throughout the whole community is a 3 foot grass strip.
Okay.
Then a 5 foot wide sidewalk, and then a minimum and maximum slope beyond the sidewalk.
So I think what he's trying to say is from in that red line, that between that red arrow going to the right, that's your grass strip. Within about a foot of that red, the vertical red line, that's where your sidewalk's starting and then goes out 5 feet.
Right.
And we're saying the side, it could be reversed. The sidewalk
Yeah.
could be right up against the curb.
So by eliminating the grass strip
Yeah,
in that section, that area,
yeah.
you would also need to reduce your sidewalk to 4 feet if we don't want to extend down the slope.
I-
But
I have
then
no
that
problem
would
with that.
require, because at the edge of that sidewalk,
Can you put a fence there?
You can put a barrier up, a
If
retaining
it-
wall,
we can do a
so,
lot of different things. If the planning commission feels that the sidewalk continuing around the entire cul-de-sac is absolutely necessary and serves a purpose that can't otherwise be served by ending the sidewalk just short of that catch basin, we'd have to re-engineer, and we'd have to extend into the ditch. I mean, we'd have to build that area up. And to build it up, I would need to involve the adjoining property owner, because you can't just, I mean,
You can't affect his drainage.
I mean, I guess there are two options for you, though. One is that you can actually move the whole thing over, right?
move
The whole cul-de-sac, I mean, if we looked at the,
Plan.
yeah,
Modify the cul-de-sac, right?
modify the cul-de-sac, modify your plan, move that cul-de-sac, if I'm looking at this picture,
Okay.
to the right by 10 feet or however many feet you need to be able to make it still work. Now, it would it looks like it would impinge on 2 lots, one on either side of the street.
Or alternatively, perhaps
Or-
go back to the T turnaround idea,
Yeah,
because there's now a hardship that's been discovered.
T turnaround, or
We can re-engineer the whole entire site.
Or the sidewalk, or we can
That's
discuss
kinda
whether the
what you're
sidewalk could be
delving into.
narrower.
With all due respect, you're talking about re-engineering all the stormwater runoff, capture, calculation. That catch basin wasn't just haphazardly placed there. It was placed there because it's integral part of all the other storm pipes that have already been set in place per the approved plan. That cul-de-sac wasn't haphazardly placed there. It was placed there per all the grades, all the runoff, all of the integral planning detail that went into this. So when you start moving road beds and catch basins and storm pipe, you move everything else down line along with it.
I guess the challenge for this commission, and I'll look to our commissioners for further discussion on this. I mean, one thing that we know is that with townhouse development especially, you tend to have a concentration of children and people, and, we've talked about walkability in these and making them more pleasant places to
Absolutely.
to
Still-
live
still a very
and
walkable community.
more safe for children. I mean, certainly being able to walk around a cul-de-sac as opposed to cross a street where cars would be turning is in my mind, is safer, and there's a safety issue there.
Okay. And
I
so-
mean, the other challenge, though, is it sounds like no one noticed this. And, we as a group have to go by, we have to trust when folks come forward with a survey that they've identified
I agree.
ditches and things like that. And it's not our responsibility to go and confirm that. It kind of falls on,
It falls on the applicant.
Yeah, on the
It's submitted
applicant,
plan
yes.
and processed
And so,
prosecuted on the entire process.
for us, it always becomes a frustrating experience
Yes.
to then be asked to
So,
make modifications, et cetera, based on, the homework not having been done properly,
yeah, so
basically.
this does not disrupt, in my opinion, and there's your town engineer here, it does not disrupt the walkability of the community. It certainly does not disrupt any of the integral stormwater drainage systems. You mentioned townhome communities are typically comprised of a lot of families with children. Having 4 young children a long time ago, my kids played in the cul-de-sac. They had their basketball hoops, their hockey nets. I think, eliminating a section of sidewalk that's adjacent and abuts a steep slope is practical. It actually prevents people from walking around and looking over the edge and seeing what's there. But if you're absolutely committed to the sidewalk going in as per plan, it's going to take a feat of engineering, and I'm happy to explore that.
And-
I don't know what the practicality would be of,
I'd like to turn to Glenn for a moment, because, again, it's not our job to re-engineer something, but it is our job to make a decision on an application. So could you comment, Glenn, on,
Right, so this is, again, it's an application that's been made, and I'm going to read the standard again, because
Okay,
it
good.
really comes back to that. So it says, unusual conditions, where an applicant shows that strict compliance with the requirements of this chapter would result in extraordinary hardship to the applicant or to the city's objectives because the conditions which are not self-imposed by the applicant or conditions exist which would result in inhibiting the achievement of the objectives of these provisions, the mayor and city council may vary, modify, or waive the requirements so that substantial justice may be done and the public interest secured. So there's an approved plan, and that basically is the law of this case. It's the law that they have to abide by, and the question here is there, if strict compliance with the requirements of that plan or of this chapter, which was, the plan was approved under this chapter, would result in extraordinary hardship to the applicant or to the city's objectives because of conditions which are not self-imposed by the applicant, or conditions exist which would result in inhibiting the achievement of the objectives of these provisions, the mayor and city council may vary, modify, or waive the requirements. So it comes back to that again.
So the word self-imposed, I guess one question is whether this was self-imposed. I mean, do we have a clear definition of this? Because clearly, if
It's sort of inherited.
It's
an inherited situation.
Well, right, there's not a clear definition of self-imposed, but the testimony or the evidence that I've heard that would go to that question is and I'm not making an argument for him or against him, but the testimony I heard from him is that there's an existing ditch that was not shown on any of the plans or discovered prior to his purchase. The plan was approved with a cul-de-sac and a sidewalk system that runs right up to that ditch. So, I think that the legal analysis would probably conclude that it wasn't self-imposed by this applicant. You might have had a different argument with the prior owner-developer. So, but that's two words in the analysis.
Another way to approach this from a different perspective, if I may. If I were able to somehow squeeze that sidewalk in as proposed, the plan doesn't require, doesn't call for, doesn't mandate or obligate me to put in a retaining wall or a fence. So in theory, you would be coming back to me saying, hey, you installed everything per plan, but this sidewalk drops off 12 feet if I step off the edge of it. And I could say, well, it's not, the plan didn't tell me to put a retaining wall in or a fence or build it up or put pillars down. So it's more of a practical discussion than it is trying to get out of an obligation. I'd be more than happy to put the sidewalk in, but it's impractical. And by still providing sidewalks throughout the community, still providing sidewalks I'll get as close to as I can, but the area in question that doesn't accommodate this sidewalk as per plan, that's what I'm requesting a waiver on. So,
By putting a sidewalk there, you're almost encouraging people to walk around there and fall off. I mean, that's what's happening.
that's it, you saw the pictures.
Yeah. They grab a tree on their way down, though.
If I were in your shoes, I would be worried about my liability if I built this knowing that without putting the wall up. Like, there are some things that may be just in terms of practical thinking.
Well, yes, it would be part
you should
of,
be,
It would be, it would be part of the city of Lewes once I dedicate the right-of-way and streets and sidewalks over. But any of the open space and common area that's outside of the right-of-way, that's retained by the homeowners association, yes, that would be something that would be prudent to put some type of.
Have you put any numbers on this? I mean, like, you might get more sympathy at, or no sympathy at X dollars, and you might get some sympathy at 10X.
To engineer a solution.
A solution.
I have not. So just to spend money coming up with an engineered plan and taking that through your process before we even get to the cost of actually installing it would be, I would think, significant.
But could we clarify, there was a plan that was developed before you took over the property, right?
There's a plan that this commission approved back in July of 21.
No, the commission recommends city council approved. A plan went to city council. The plan that this commission had put forward to city council had a T-turn. City council said that they wanted it to be a cul-de-sac, a circle. And they the applicant went back and redesigned it, and at that point obviously did not look at the land to see specifically that they were redesigning it to fit that. They did not notice the ditch.
But this was
And-
done with the previous owner before.
Yes, previous owner, yes.
You purchased it, right?
He purchased it with the cul-de-sac.
So, and I'm unfamiliar with the T, that might have been original design that was revised, but I would suppose that even the T would have had a sidewalk system that went around the T.
Yes. But the T didn't extend as close to the property
Okay,
line,
yeah,
you see,
I'm
so you could,
unfamiliar with that.
It was probably flatter on the end, and therefore less
Yeah.
of a problem. So
Yeah.
maybe city council shouldn't design either.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
yes.
Yes, thank you. That was what I was going to ask.
thank you, too. I'm going to... Catch your breath. I can't speak engineer lingo.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ben Hearn. I work for GMB. We're the city engineer. I think Charlie O'Donnell's also on Zoom as
Okay.
well. I mean, there's definitely different engineering options that could make this, work, as Bob stated. I don't know if you want me to go through every single option you proposed, or, I think the option he's got here is a workable solution.
Could I add just an element? Yes, I would like to go through a couple of options, with safety being the number one criteria, because I think that's the real issue here.
I mean, I think with this option he's got proposed, I think it is safe in terms of, providing ADA-approved ramps and a crosswalk. I think I'd prefer the crosswalk to be moved further down to the narrower point of the street. Longer crosswalks promote more pedestrian accidents than shorter crosswalks because there's less time for you to be in the street. Obviously here it's not a through street, it's a cul-de-sac, speeds would be low. So there's that option. I think the option of providing a 4-foot sidewalk behind the catch basin, I don't know if that could fully fit, because not only is there the 4-foot sidewalk, you've also got to have a 9-inch curb there, which that precludes or pushes you out into the, past that 48-inch buffer that Bob had identified, leading to that steep drop-off. Doing that type of an operation, I think you'd still need a retaining wall. With the retaining wall, you would need to, you'd affect that ditch's drainage shed, or not drainage shed, but, ability, its capacity to push flow through. So that would involve a culvert pipe. That would also involving the adjacent owner as well.
This is the adjacent owner that's going to be affected someday if and when things connect.
Correct.
So
Yes, yeah.
this is not all new to him, he's, or her.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Eliminating the sidewalk, I think there was a concern about the road. Is there an issue with the road eroding away? I think there's curb wrapped around that cul-de-sac, which directs all the stormwater from the site, or that, localized area, to the catch basin. I think if we haven't really looked at that type of an option, but I think riprap or some sort of armament down the backside of the curbing would help protect that slope and not cause an issue where we're concerned about the road, degrading.
Right.
Which is, we don't want that, so.
The trees will not be cut down on that slope. They're going to remain unless they get in the way.
So there's one...
I need you at the mic, please. That's okay. I just need you at the mic.
There's one substantial tree that I believe serves as stability.
It's holding that end of the
It's,
cul-de-sac
it
up.
probably has, it's a very mature tree, it probably has a very extended and mature root system that would, it's holding that slope together right now.
Right, so the riprap will be just surface treatment as opposed to a retaining wall, which would have to be dug down. So riprap would be better with wire reinforcement?
Yeah, and again, we can look at the only request tonight before you is would the City of Lewes Council, Planning Commission be amenable to eliminating a section of sidewalk that just doesn't fit behind that curve?
And would that be safer if there was no sidewalk right there?
Right, so maybe with the elimination of the sidewalk, and we'll discuss where it's appropriate to cross the street and put the ramps. We would recommend, propose some type of deterrent, whether it be 2 feet or 3 feet, something that we could approximate and install behind that catch basin along the lines.
A railing,
retaining wall,
something,
a
yeah,
railing,
something like that.
guardrail or
Yeah.
something. I didn't think about this, but a guardrail would probably make a lot of sense, right?
Less signage on the way down there, warning
Yeah,
drivers.
so there is, and there is plenty of streetlights, the yellow dots there on the
Streetlights.
plan.
Dead-end indication.
So, yeah, so we're doing, back to your Sussex County days, we're doing the reserves in Ocean View, and we have a lot of guardrails being installed, wooden decorative guardrails, but substantial and Delta.
Before you sit down from GMB, are there other options that should be considered, or that could be considered?
Some notes here. I mean, so the three options I kind of thought might be available. Number one is the sidewalk waiver. Number two is, reverting to a T turnaround. And number three was the pipe with the retaining wall option. I don't particularly like the idea of shifting the entire cul-de-sac. I guess that would be to your right, because it encroaches more upon lot 70 and I don't know.
69.
There's already encroachment into those properties now, and moving it over 10 more feet, would probably make that a very unbuildable situation. So, those are the three options. We would need to look, if we chose a specific one, to the engineering side to make sure it's sound. We haven't quite done all that at this point.
Could the, excuse me, could the radius of the cul-de-sac be changed, be shortened?
I believe the radius of the cul-de-sac is meeting the minimum for the Office of the State Fire Marshal for the turnaround for the fire truck. So I don't think the radius can be reduced at any, because I believe it's the minimum that they need for turnaround.
And was there a reason why City Council didn't like the T-turn?
I believe there was a concern about aesthetics. And I think that was one of the main.
I just don't recall.
It's been over about 2 years, but I do remember there was some concern about that because, again, if the property ever next door develops, the road is designed to connect through, so they're going to have to figure out the ditch. But a good chunk of that cul-de-sac is going to get torn out, and the sidewalk would get torn out as well.
Yeah.
Would get straightened out. So from what I can remember, I think they had a concern about the turnaround for the fire, from the fire radius for the Office of the State Fire Marshal. But even they had reviewed, and the T turnaround had worked for them. But I think there was more concern about, I think, the look and the character. And then as it dead ends, it just doesn't dead end into nothing. There was something around it.
So our options are to recommend approval, or recommend denial, or recommend approval with
Conditions.
suggested conditions. So are there more questions, or are we moving towards?
I have another question. Would there be significant utility changes if it went back to a T intersection.
It would be stormwater management, right?
So I'm looking at the southeasterly portion where the grade drops significantly, the bottom part of the cul-de-sac.
There'd be grading.
Dial. I don't know the extent of your proposed T, but you've got drainage there, you've got a drop off there. So that ditch starts to bend around. So the bottom lots on River Birch, towards the bottom of the drawing, you can see there's close lines at the 6 o'clock on the dial at the cul-de-sacs a clock face. Those lines, those grade lines, like it's very steep there and continues behind 69, 68, 67 as part of that whole drainage conveyance ditch system. So by changing it to a T, I don't know the extent of how far your T reaches, but we'd be looking at something similar over there if the T came.
But that's on the land of Lewes Waterfront Preserve. That's not,
Well, barely. Probably where it says manhole B13 on the bottom of the drawing.
Lower left-hand
Right there.
corner.
That's probably a good indication of the rear property line for us.
but you're grading there. I mean, the 10 contour is there, and 10 through
Yeah,
14.
we're not grading that. It's part of our drainage, our conveyance. So our grading starts at lot 69 and heads east.
There's open space back there, and then there's some woodlands back there.
I think to answer your question, for sewer and water, it wouldn't affect anything. Just, I know it's not on the plan, but I don't think it would. Stormwater, we'd have to configure it a little bit differently. Trying to utilize what he's already got installed to the best of our abilities without changing it. You know, I'd have to look back at what was originally designed by, with the T to know for sure, but it would have stormwater effects.
So when it was designed with the T, the lots were in different locations.
Were they?
They were slightly over.
And just to be clear, back to the Madam Chairperson's point, I mean, there was a proposal in front of you, and that's the proposal that you're going to vote up or down or, recommend conditions. An appropriate condition would not be recommend approval so long as it's a T. I mean, that's way beyond the scope of what you're being asked to consider tonight.
So that if you wanted to recommend a T, you'd be recommending denial, and that they come back with
Well, if you
another, they could come back with anything, but
That's right. If you recommend denial and the city council takes that recommendation and denies, then there's an engineering problem that remains, and there might be something new that comes back.
Just perhaps one final question, Bob, and then maybe we can bring this thing to a head. So, I may have gotten lost on this. We do or do not have a fence or some sort of a safety mechanism on the back side of that with the waiver right now? I think it's an important question. There is or not proposed that?
What I submitted
Yes,
for
sir.
a request?
What you have. I'm trying to visualize, I've seen the picture, and I've seen the schematic, but to the point that's been raised by several commissioners, I think is very valid.
It is.
Yeah, what do we do, and maybe not even a wall, with no disrespect to retaining, what do we do to keep a person, a kid chasing a
Guardrails,
basketball,
some type of
you know how it is, or we know,
Right, so some type of,
because I would propose we do that with the condition.
prohibitive, restrictive installation that would prevent.
your current application does not include that, so that would be a condition we would need to
So my
put on
current-
it.
Yes, and my current application is kind of rudimentary with
Got it.
my sketches. What my current application is a request for a waiver of a certain section of sidewalk that will not pragmatically fit. I'm not set on that location of that crosswalk there. I can extend the sidewalk. I just wanted to bring to the commission's attention what we discovered about 6 weeks ago when we set that catch basin, that, we've got an issue here. We don't have enough room to adhere to this plan. So ending those sidewalks at some point, I think far enough away from the terminus of the cul-de-sac, still providing the ramps, the handicap ramps, and then putting some type of barricade or guardrail or decorative fencing along the back of that catch basin where the sidewalk was originally planned. That's very sensible. But before I got into a whole lot of engineering feats on how to install the sidewalk, I wanted to come before you tonight and request a waiver of a certain section of sidewalk that can't be accommodated with the current lay of the land.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the waiver to eliminate a portion of the sidewalk, as discussed, with conditions that we see a follow-up design to show protection, show the crosswalk, and possibly even eliminate the required grassy planting strip, which is no longer needed, and eliminate or reduce the width of the sidewalk. But we need to see something on plan submitted to us for our next meeting.
So I just need some clarification on the motion because, this is a motion to recommend to city council. So are you saying, are you asking that this plan come back to you before it goes to city council and you see it? Because then I think it'd be more appropriate to wait to see the revised plan before you recommend anything to city council. Or are you saying that we're recommending approval so long as you amend the plans that you bring to city council with the following conditions?
The city council is free to change things as they see fit, and depends how much time you have.
So that's what brought me here.
Let's
Yes.
withdraw the motion so we can have this conversation. And
Yes,
then-
that's
Okay. So we're advancing our efforts out there, and our expectation is to start installing the curb and sidewalk throughout the community over the next couple of weeks. So when we got to this point here, we called a timeout to say, hey, what do we do when we get to this section of the plan? Obviously, the sidewalk's not going to fit the way it's designed.
So you've surveyed and you located it, but you haven't started pouring yet. You'll be pouring over the next several weeks.
Right.
And this could be the last section you pour
Correct.
as you get approval.
Instead of trying to engineer a plan that would be a robust plan, I think it would be an extensive exercise in trying to figure out how to get that section of sidewalk installed per this plan, with the challenges that we have with the ditch. So I'm not in a rush, and I'm not requesting a specific amount of sidewalk be eliminated. I'm just presenting the challenge that we have and asking for the commission to consider a waiver of some section of this sidewalk that won't
I know,
practically.
I realize mayor and city council are going to want to see this.
Sure.
So my motion would be to approve the waiver to include your presentation to mayor and city council, showing a detailed plan of what you're proposing to do. Is that reasonable?
To me, sure.
Are there specific conditions that you want to include in the
Yes.
motion? So-
Would that
so-
be like-
So your motion then would be a recommendation of approval with the following conditions: that the crosswalk be where it's shown here, or that it's located further up the cul-de-sac, and
some
you
type
have
of-
protective barrier at the end of the cul-de-sac.
All of the above, yes.
And is one of the conditions that this be put down in a plan that is presented to city council, mayor and city council?
You have to
I mean,
show,
can you make that,
Yes.
because that's, I think,
Yes.
one thing that
Yes, I mean,
was
ultimately, if city council were to approve it, the plan would need to be amended and recorded anyway. So at some point, that's an exercise that's going to
Yeah.
have to happen. So if you want it on a plan that goes to city, it doesn't have to be the actual record plan that goes to city council, but a plan of this nature that shows all of those elements.
So it sounds like the motion would be to recommend approval of the elimination of a portion of the sidewalk to mayor and council with the conditions that a more detailed plan showing the portion of the sidewalk to be eliminated shown on the plan, that the crosswalk be shown on the plan, and that whatever protected
fencing,
barrier
yeah.
that is being proposed be also shown on the plan, or some type of construction detail be provided to mayor and council for their determination.
That's what I said, didn't I?
And can I just add one little thing to that too, and that is that options for changing the crosswalk be shown in the plan. I mean, I think that that's one thing that we discussed.
So I would just ask, and I'll work with
Yeah.
your town engineer for guidance as to where is the most
Yes.
sensible place to put the crossing
Yep.
and the sidewalk.
Narrow
section.
the better, narrow throat.
Okay, we have a motion,
I'll second Joe's motion.
okay. Discussion?
Only discussion I have is, could we restate the motion?
Yeah, okay, could we?
I think for clarity,
Can you read it
that's
back,
fair, and then we can vote.
Janelle?
Guys did a nice job.
Again, I was talking and not writing at the same time, so what I have is that it's a recommendation for approval of a partial elimination of the sidewalk to mayor and city council, and that as part of the recommendation, that a more detailed plan showing the crosswalk location and the protected barrier detail be shown on the plan to mayor and council.
And we're actually recommending that there be a protective barrier. Okay.
It's been seconded by Bob.
Seconded by Bob. Discussion?
Yes, I think we're trying to re-engineer this. I think I would like to vote against it, denial, until they come back with a better plan. You know, more complete plan, but we're saying that let's approve it and then find out what they're trying to do. So I'm opposed.
Okay, other discussion? And at this point, you can put other conditions on, additional conditions on it, or, which we then have to vote on, but yes.
This isn't really discussion, it's more of sort of a comment, but I always like to leave things to the professionals. And I think that in this case, letting the engineers decide, with the criteria being very clear that safety is paramount, and that not having a little section of sidewalk there may not be the worst thing in the world. In fact, it might be better. So anyway, I just think that leaving the discretion here, especially with the city engineer here advising, is a sound way to go, and get it to city council with that proviso on it.
Any other discussion?
I would say that I would recognize this as a hardship. In this case, this applicant did not bring this on himself by having a poor survey. And I appreciate the fact that he didn't have to be prompted to put in handicap ramps, that he proffered that already, and I would certainly back that. So, yes, I would be supporting this.
Are we ready to vote?
The only other thing I'd add, if I
Okay,
may,
go
Madam
ahead,
Chair,
Tom.
is that the newest member of the Planning Commission has joined us electronically in participant mode, Jackie Mehta. So.
Oh, okay,
we should
I was going to
include Jackie on
introduce
our
her
vote.
later.
Yep, she's on horn. or on-
So if, Jackie, you're with us, are you?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm here.
We are very pleased to welcome our most recent member of the Lewes Planning Commission, and that's Jackie Mehta. She's currently Commissioner of the Alcohol and Beverage Control Board, and previously served as Deputy Legal Counsel for Governor Carney. She previously also served as a Chief Policy Advisor for the Delaware Department of Services for Children, Youth, and Their Families. So she brings a great wealth of experience, and we welcome you to our group.
I would also note that she came on about 2 or 3 minutes into this application, so she has heard 99% of this application. So I'm going to guess Glenn's going to agree with me that she is able to
She's
vote
able
on
to
this
vote.
application.
Okay.
If she
Great.
chooses.
And I should say, she is a late arrival because she unfortunately was double booked this evening for a meeting of the Alcohol and Beverage Control Board. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to coordinate all of her meetings so that she's with us from the start. But It's great to have you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just take a quick minute to first thank everybody for your patience with me this evening. It was not my intention to miss the very first meeting after I was added to the commission. I'm delighted and honored to be able to serve, but it really was not my intention to be participating virtually. But as Madam Chair indicated, I'm the alcohol commissioner for the state of Delaware, and I had a protest hearing actually scheduled that I had to hear this evening before this was all put together. So I was not able to change that, but I am fortunate I will have control of my schedule going forward, and this won't happen again. And I will look forward to the next meeting where I can be there in person and meet all of you, if not sooner. So thank you.
As we also look forward, Jackie, thank you. So we have a vote now, and I've been going through alphabetically. I know you can get prepared. But beginning with Melanie.
Yes, I vote to forward this to Mayor and City Council. I think it's the best possible solution given the circumstances. And I think it will provide a safe solution.
Bob?
I vote in favor of the motion. I think Joe crafted it very well, given the competing problems of time and construction and this surprise hardship. So I think apologize to Mayor and for City Council for sort of dumping it on their lap to review, but that's how it should be.
Rich?
I support the proposal as it was expertly worded by Joe. And I just have to say that I think that the applicant presented honestly, and it was a good discussion. I was glad to have the city engineer here, too.
Tom?
I concur and vote in favor of the application and in favor of the motion. I do think the applicant and the engineer added a lot, and we're very open and transparent about what they can and can't do here. And I think that the safety issue that we discussed, I think that Rich raised originally, is an important one to keep in mind moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Jonathan?
As I said, I'm opposed for the reason I stated. I think it could be further put forward before we dump it on the mayor and council.
Jackie?
I vote in favor of the motion to send this forward to council. Thank you.
I also vote in favor of the motion and echo Melanie's reasons that were so well stated.
And I vote in favor of my own motion, too.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
How do I keep missing you, Joe? I don't know.
Shy.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the motion passes, and
And then there's a recommendation now going to City Council.
Yes.
When will they?
This will be their meeting in July, so their first meeting in, their meeting in July. So I have the date somewhere. I just,
I
I
think it's
wanted
the
to
11th
put
as
it
well.
up later, but it's not.
We'll have the time to.
Yeah, you have until,
July.
it's July 11th, so I am going to need documentation as the 23rd, next Thursday, please.
okay. Thank you very much for appearing.
Thank you,
Okay.
other
All
members
right.
of the committee.
And thank you to GMB. Okay, we're on to D4, appointment of members of the Planning Commission to the Joint Site Development Ad Hoc Review Committee. And keep in mind, this committee now, the appointments to that committee are for a 6-month period. If you recall, in the past, the committee was being formed kind of truly on an ad hoc basis each time an application came in. But with the new subdivision plan, we made some changes to that, and so it's for a 6-month period. And I would like to appoint Rich Innes, Bob Hefferman, and Joe Hockner. And this is something that I think all of us will be serving on at some point as we go through 6-month rotations with it. So please get ready to serve is all I can say. Okay.
Yeah, we've only had one application the whole year, so, you know.
Now, the D5, Can we pull this up, the action plan? If you recall, we've talked about looking at an action plan for subcommittees. We currently have 2 active subcommittees, the Annexation Subcommittee and the Tree Ordinance Subcommittee. Now, the Annexation Subcommittee is coming towards its final conclusion, which is wonderful because it means it has actual changes to the code that will be presented to the LPC and then to Mayor and City Council, hopefully for approval. What we found in the past is by having these subcommittees, we're able to make progress on issues that are important to the LPC but don't concern specific applications. Now, the last time around that we did this, we had a fairly long list of potential action items. And we went through the process of, as a committee, rating them in terms of their importance or urgency, and then sending that with our ratings on to Mayor and City Council to get their feedback in terms of what they see as the most important or urgent. Because keep in mind, whatever we do, we'll be recommending to them. So it's good to be aligned in terms of priorities and focus. What I've done is I went through the old action plan list, and I have to say, it really, I should have brought it with little check marks next to things because it made me feel quite good that we really had addressed a lot of items on it. So, progress has been made. I looked at those and tried to lump them into kind of categories or groups that would make sense for a subcommittee to really dive into. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but what I've done is this is a table that shows an action area, and I'll just go through one of them as an example. So one action area would be looking at the use regulations in the zoning code. Another might be considering the dimensional regulations. And then in the next column, I've put a description of kind of what would the scope of this be, what would the focus, why might we be looking at this? And the third column is a very specific proposed focus that says, what areas of the code are we talking about? Because I think it has helped us both on annexation and on the subdivision code to have a focus on a particular area of the code. Because it's easy to move into all of these things, and then pretty soon you're looking at the whole code, and it's hard to bite that off, chew it, and swallow it, And then there's a column for consultant needed, and this would be if you believe that a consultant would be needed to help us. We have a budget that we have at our disposal, but it is a limited budget. And then the third column is for you to make a rating of the importance of it. And think of it as kind of importance/urgency. How critical is this that this would, be one of our top priorities? And the rating is simply 1 to 5. 1, not at all important. 5, very important. And what I'm asking folks to do is we'll have Janelle distribute this, and there's a space at the top. If you can go into the Excel spreadsheet, enter your name, do your ratings at the side, and then send it back to Janelle. And if we go to the very bottom of this chart, if we can scan down to that. Where is it? Yeah. At the very bottom, I've included, and if you're good at Excel, you can add more rows as needed. I've included some blank rows where if there's something missing that you think is important, add it in. If there's an aspect of something that's already listed that you want to make sure is being covered, put that in the comments. And then at the very bottom, I've just included a couple notes. One is that once we have the revisions and update to the comprehensive plan, that may identify additional areas that we need to do some work on. And the other is that many projects that don't require a consultant, don't think of those as, if you think of some of the projects that we've done, we've called in experts to come and meet with us, do presentations, et cetera. And a consultant, we're really talking about a paid consultant that we have with us, walking with us the whole way. So even though there may not be a consultant, don't think that we wouldn't be bringing in expertise where it's needed. So the ask of everyone is to fill this out, get it back to Janelle over the course of the next 2 weeks. I have to look at a calendar to see what a date would be. Maybe you could put that in the email, Janelle. And that would give us time to pull all of your comments together. And I throw this out to the commissioners, and it's really, we had a very full schedule, and if we'd had the other subdivision down for a discussion here, it would have been a very, very long meeting. So one question is this something we would like to discuss in a special session where we just focus on what are our priorities for the year, what are the areas, we think we should be bringing forward to City Council, or do you think this is something we can include just in a regular meeting?
I guess my concern is how much does this overlap the comprehensive plan? And I think we're definitely going to have some paths forward from that we need to pursue, and which would have priority is a hard one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when you look at this, you're going to see a lot of things that we know are part of the comprehensive plan. And if we look at the time frame for the comprehensive plan, my thought was we can get going on some of these things right now as opposed to waiting for the comprehensive plan. And, I can look to Glenn for advice on this too, but I know that we know that the comprehensive plan has the force of law, but in the end, we are in the safest position when we've actually made changes to the code. And so I'd feel more comfortable moving forward where we're actually beginning to look at some of those that we think need to be done. And I should say, I do have one thing on here that probably doesn't even take a whole subcommittee, and that is, it's listed as cleanup of a variety of clauses in the code. So this is kind of a long shopping list of fairly minor changes, but they keep getting put off. And just spending the time to have city staff put those together, bring it back to the LPC for us to really go through and say, are we comfortable with those, and just get them done. Small things, but they're big irritants, and they're big, they are time consumers. So
I think a good example would be addressing through lots, as was, came up tonight, that, and I deal with a lot of, we've got, unfortunately, a lot of through lots, so that's, planning office has a list of things.
Or definitions throughout.
Yeah, that's another one that's down here on the list, is to, we do have a fairly long list of definitions that have been brought up that we need either to get consistency across the code, or the definitions need to be updated based on changes in technology and other things, or just definitions that we don't have clearly defined that need to be added.
Well, I would be in favor of certainly setting a list of subcommittees that we could have, and setting some priorities, assigning people. And by the time you're done with that, the comprehensive plan will be out of our, we have to, it'll be gone from us. So then you have the fall and winter to work on it.
And any opinions on whether we should have a separate session on this or whether we should do it in a meeting?
Just a thought there, if we had a meeting, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If we had a meeting that wasn't, there was, we've had a couple of meetings that have been fairly easy. Tonight was, we earned our keep, our big salaries. But if we had, if it looks like we have a meeting, and maybe I'll turn to Janelle for this, that is, that we only have a couple of items on, then I think we could accomplish but otherwise though, Nancy, Madam Chair, my
Nancy's fine.
I would think that we might need a special session because that's important. So that would be the only thing, is if we had a short meeting that we could piggyback on.
So for the next few months, you'll have the Roosevelt Landing subdivision. The last meeting, you guys spent hour and a half on it.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
So I expect
The
that
comprehensive
to,
plan.
in the comprehensive
Yeah.
plan. So I expect you to be deep diving into those over the next couple of months. By the way, I just sent everybody your homework from Nancy.
Oh, good.
And I gave you to July 1st, so a little more than 2 weeks. Friday afternoon. So please check your email. But yeah, if there's a date that you want to get together, maybe in the day or whenever, just let me know. But yeah, I expect for the next 2 months, you're going to be involved, and maybe even 3 months, with the Roosevelt Landing subdivision. And I know that's a big project for this commission.
Let's go with a separate meeting then. And we sometimes have had these separate meetings an hour before the planning commission, then we have a break and do the planning commission meeting, or we can have it on a separate day.
I think I would lean towards a completely different, separate meeting.
Okay.
Only because there's some really important content here, and it would be good to approach it with focus just on future goals.
Okay.
Not to be complicated with other matters that we've all been preparing for.
Right.
And
Can I give you the challenging task, Janelle, of finding a date and time that will work for all of us, okay?
My first question is, are you going to want to try and do this before the next planning commission meeting, which by the way is July 20th, or just sometime in July? That's my biggest question now, because it's going to be hard to get this scheduled for the rest of the month. I'm just saying that, because I already gave you to July 1st to get everything back.
And I do have a follow-up question. I know that Mayor and City Council,
Just keep talking, it'll come.
okay, I know Mayor and City Council has been doing workshop format and doing it during the day, and I don't know if that's a possibility at all, but I'm putting that out there.
If you'd like to meet during the day, you just let me know. I know some people have work schedules, so I'll come up with a couple of different times and dates. And then I'll try midday and late afternoon and evening. I'll see what the calendars tell me. And then I'll send out a couple of dates, and then, but I just want to know if you're trying to meet before the next planning commission meeting or after the next planning commission meeting, because the planning commission meeting is July 20th. I did ask for you guys to send everything back by July 1st. Mayor and council does meet July 11th. So just, if there's a preference before the next meeting, just let me know, and then I can start looking before that, or.
I prefer to do it before the next meeting so that we can take the content of it, and then it may only take not very long if we have reached something after that meeting that would be in a format that we'd be ready to put forward to mayor and city council.
So right now, what's looking good, is like the week of it's literally the Monday or the Tuesday before before the next meeting, but I'll keep scouring the calendars, because I've got a lot of meetings I have to work around, so.
Okay. Well, let's move on to reports, but before we do that, I want to make a couple announcements and welcome, excuse me, first of all, welcome Tim Ritzert, who is now our ex officio member of City Council. And it is great to have Andrew Williams with us also, who the mayor, you may not have realized, the mayor has always been an ex officio member of the LPC, but it's great to have you here and present, and we appreciate it. And then we also have a new representative from the Board of Public Works, and we appreciate, I said they've made it very easy for us. We still have a Tom from the, from the Board of Public Works, but now it's Tom Owen, okay? And it's been great to have you to join us, Tom. We appreciate it.
Second tour, right, Tom?
Yes, yeah.
For like 2 years, now he's back.
So reports from subcommittees, annexation?
Yes, we met this past month, and we're ironing out a lot of details, and we're meeting again this Friday, and hopefully we'll be able to present something to the Planning Commission maybe in July, if not August, definitely.
That's great.
Great.
And we really thank you and the subcommittee for all of their work. And Melanie has done an incredible job of, I think, keeping City Council updated on what we're doing on this. And I think with any other subcommittees, we want to follow that model, you know, to keep them up to date. A tree ordinance subcommittee, Deborah?
Yes, excited to be embarking on this. I think it's long overdue, and people have really been wanting it for a long time. So I'm just going to talk about my general approach to this is that I want to be comprehensive yet not overcomplicate. So first of all, we do have 3 LPC members, which I'm the chair. Joe Hockner has volunteered, and Rich Ennis has volunteered. So we are covered on that. Also, Marty Thompson will be representing Parks and Rec, and also, you know, an ex officio member. I am speaking to a number of potential ex officio members. I'm looking at having a balance of people who have experience with these ordinances, people who are experts on trees, and, you know, general policy. And so I am not sure if these are people that we want to have them, everyone sitting as an ex officio member, or just as you said, as guests and invite people to share their expertise. I think that's going to be really important on this because it isn't something that we're going to have a consultant walking us through. And we need people who really do have the knowledge, but we don't need to necessarily have those people at every meeting. So that's kind of the preliminary plan. Initially, think just is setting goals. What do we want to address with this ordinance and achieve? So do we want to, you know, what kind of streets are we going to address? Are we going to do just, you know, existing trees, or address new trees to be planted? Only public trees, some private trees, or all public and private trees? And then you get into the diameter of the trees, and there's quite a lot of technicality on that. And obviously studying other ordinances. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we need to look at the existing ordinances that are truly in comparable communities. With similar, you know, with historic districts, with similar variety of densities, with a beach versus a town. And then another important thing is, I've spoken to Anne Marie about it, and that she really, you know, one thing that she asked is just to come early to mayor and city council. And so in the preliminary stages, after we set some of those goals, to do an informal presentation to mayor and city council, to check in with them and make sure that we're on a track that everyone is comfortable with and that we feel is going to, you know, be good for the city and move forward.
Great, thank you, Deborah.
And also, our first meeting is July 7th.
Oh, great.
You have a time?
Yes, at July 7th at 2 p.m.
Am I the only one that noticed that Deborah said, talk about the tree annexation committee? You said embarking on it, right?
Ah, there we go. You're so punny.
I'm just worn down at 9 o'clock, I think. Well said.
Can I just make one comment? First of all, I think this is overdue and great, and thanks to Deborah for taking it on. I was recently, became a trustee of the Nature Conservancy. This is one of the areas that they are really focusing on. And I've asked the Emily Knurl, who is helping oversee all the work in Delaware, to keep me very well posted on what they are learning, what they are uncovering, and to make that part of the resources that we can draw on as we go forward with this. I also looked on, there is a wealth of information, as Deborah already found out on the internet. There are model ordinances, tree, what is it called again? I actually printed it out here. Tree City USA is actually an organization which is designed to help us do this, basically. And that might be something else down the road, is that we may want to apply to be, instead of, we're already Lewis and Bloom City.
I think we are a Tree City USA. That is why the great irony that we didn't have a tree ordinance.
I remember seeing the sign up,
Yes, we've got some of those signs somewhere in town, so it's ironic that we don't have an ordinance.
Yeah, and that they would grant us.
I'm
that,
glad
we
we're
have an
embarking on one.
Okay, before we get too far.
Let's not splinter up.
We don't want to get deep into the woods here. So Glenn, anything to announce or share?
Any updates? I hope that's welcome news to you.
One more question I'd like to ask with everyone here at input. Am I, as a new subcommittee chair, do I have all the people that I need to have on this subcommittee? And I know that Glenn has a role, but not a role that is required until we get to developing the actual ordinance, correct?
Right, you'll probably get to a point where you'll have some legal questions, and, I've dealt with Rehoboth Beach's tree ordinance pretty extensively,
Yes.
and they've got a pretty aggressive tree ordinance, so I have some legal knowledge beyond just, the basic stuff when it comes to tree ordinances. So at some point, but I don't want to or need to be at every one of your meetings.
No,
I did
absolutely
invite
not,
him
yeah.
to the first one so he can kind of give that background, and then he'll probably disappear, and then when we start writing the ordinance, we'll bring
Or
him
I'm
in.
thinking even maybe not waste Glenn's time or our resources to invite Glenn to maybe the second meeting or even the third meeting, at the point where what I'd be looking for is the warning of what should we avoid doing? What are some areas that have been problematic? I'd like to be aware of those going in. Obviously that doesn't say, no, we're not going to do that because it's been problematic.
Right.
But at least knowing up front.
Yeah, there's a Third Circuit Court of Appeals case that was decided about 6 months ago that touches on a tree ordinance and kind of lays out some of the parameters. So I'm happy to send that to you, and you can review it even before your first meeting. And if you have questions, we can talk.
That would be great. That would be great. And then maybe we can request Glenn when we're ready for those issues. That would be wonderful.
And Marty, I know we not typically taking comment, but she wanted to let us know we've been a tree city for 21 years, and the city does have a tree ordinance for our city-owned trees, which are primarily the street
Right.
trees.
And I did know that we were a tree
Yeah.
city.
Thank you, Marty.
There are some signs
And
somewhere.
it certainly, I think, would be helpful, Glenn, to get insights early-ish on of things, as Deborah said, to avoid, especially where we've seen different cities and jurisdictions where there's been a ton of litigation
Right.
that ends up
Right.
benefiting not the trees, not the city.
But lawyers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think, it's tricky because it's like, we don't want to just stay the road that we know
Yeah,
is
no,
legally
no,
safe.
yeah.
But on the other hand, we want to be able to develop code knowing, what the roadblocks
Yeah.
and the potential issues would be
Right.
up front.
Yeah.
So.
It'd be great to look at what we already have on the books, and because when you get into private, looking at private property and how you, at least what I've read so far, it mostly is about taking down trees that are dangerous or diseased or infringing on other people's properties. So anyway, and more limited there. But let's look and see if we can build on what's already there.
Anything to report, Tom, from BPW?
No, not at the moment. We're aggressively going down New Road and trying to go across it, and we've got all kinds of projects going on, right? And not the least of which is Donovan Smith, which should get started. Well, every time we turn around, there's another issue with Donovan Smith, but yeah, we have $45 million worth of capital improvements in 5 years, and now we're looking for the money.
From City Council, Mayor and City Council, any updates?
Just so everybody, Jackie, they're nodding their heads no.
Janelle, any updates?
So at your desk tonight, some of you had 2 packets, some of you just had 1 packet. The binder is from the workshop, the orientation workshop. So please take a look at that. If you were unable to attend in person, please view online. I'm being nice, but I know it's a requirement, so please view it online. There is a sheet all the way in the back that you're going to need to sign, which is our anti-harassment and anti-bullying policy that you attended, at least virtually, and saw Glenn's presentations on FOIA and ethics. And then the other big packet is the new subdivision code. I printed out the ordinance version because it's been sent to the online and they have not yet codified it because, again, it's kind of hot off the presses. And then I did provide a number of other updates from the zoning code that we've done over the last, I think, 2 years. So I made copies of those. So you can just take those pages, the old pages out and put the new pages in, and you have an updated zoning code. And if you have questions, just reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
Glenn, because it's come up, we're looking on these subcommittees having some ex officio members. And of course, one issue then became, should we be having any concerns in terms of FOIA, other issues when they're not voting members, issues like more than 2 people, or with the most subcommittees, 2 people becomes a meeting.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because ex officio members generally have all the rights and privileges, but for voting as a regular member. I don't recall whether our charter or our code addresses. No, I think it does. To be honest, now that I think it through, they are not counted for purposes of quorums, ex officio.
Right.
So, for example, if the mayor doesn't show up, we don't lose.
Yeah.
So they're not counted for purposes of quorum, but. I think you do have to be concerned about FOIA issues as far as emails go. Again, you wouldn't get into it from a quorum perspective, but you raise a good question.
Is there anything we should be sending to them that maybe is not as extensive as the training we're doing for, committee members or commissioners that?
I don't think it hurts for any of them to have that sort of training, but as I think it through, the ex officio component doesn't create a significant concern for me over, is there going to be a FOIA violation? Because generally they're excluded from most of those things for quorum purposes, so you wouldn't get into that. But it can't hurt for them to have some basic working knowledge of, certainly of the ethics side of it, and then less importantly, the FOIA side of it.
Okay.
So may I ask a question about that? Because we don't call them ex officios. We have committees with committee members who are not on the board. And we just call it a committee. It's not, they're not ex officio at all.
Do they count towards a quorum of that committee, though?
No. I mean, the committee then comes back to the board with any kind of recommendation. They have no ability to do anything specific other than bring back things to the board. But we have people on finance committee that are not on the board and they're just ordinary citizens.
Well, on a certain level, you could say we are not able to do anything specific in terms of other than make recommendations. So, and our, in a sense, because our subcommittees are doing the same thing, but
But the chairperson tonight could have chosen 3 people in the crowd, and if they agreed to serve on a committee of this commission, they would be for FOIA purposes a committee, and they'd have to notice their meetings and all of that. So So if you're setting up, again, you've got your own attorney, the BPW, but my advice to this group would be is if you're setting up a committee, even if they're not members of the planning commission, it's still a committee set up by a public body of the city.
Right.
They then become a public body, a subcommittee of this body, and they're required to comply with FOIA.
Glenn will be sending BPW the bill later, yes.
Yeah.
I'm joking. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
There you go.
I did have a FOIA question for ex officio members. Should we be advising them to set up different emails? Because the issue about if they were using their personal emails is that, they could be discoverable. But if they're not voting, is this kind of a moot point if they're only providing input?
If they're an ex officio member, their emails are still discoverable through FOIA. So they should have some means of searching for those emails to the extent we're required to turn them over.
And I think like the best practices is don't email everybody and don't reply all.
Yeah.
Or like if you send a mass email, please do not reply all.
Yeah.
Reply back to the chair or the staff member, and that way then it keeps everybody safe.
Maybe that should be on everyone's sign off on their email.
But without setting up a separate email account, you could, just in terms of titling each note, having a code at the beginning that indicates it's for that committee, makes it easier to identify those without having somebody go through all of your, it's the privacy issue when someone goes through all of your email, so.
Right, and some people are
Having an
good at
easy-
setting up folders, so as soon as they get an email that relates to the commissioner or their subcommittee, they drag it into that folder so they know all their
Yeah.
and right there. Yeah.
Don't want to need to see the number of folders.
Okay, we have
I bet.
any other announcements? Okay, we have the minutes, and I had a change to the minutes. I don't know whether anyone else had any edits or changes to the minutes of May 18th. And I can pass my change in. It said, Ms. Stacy reviewed the zoning categorization for open space and the 10% requirement for open space in subdivisions. And then it goes on to say, also, it is important to note the changes in the subdivision code for maximum length of cul-de-sac, narrower streets permitted, and it said, and additional open space. And the point I had made was that under the new subdivision code, while there were changes to the length of the cul-de-sac, it was a change to 300 feet, not 325, and that those changes were made in concert with other changes, such as narrowing streets while requiring 30% open space. So I can send that
To Jackie.
edit into Jackie. Any other edits or changes? I should note that we did receive an email from a member of the public with some comments on the minutes. And these were comprised primarily of some questions, additional information, et cetera. And I would urge any members of the public, any community members, when you're sending in comments, especially on a particular application, we will be holding on that application a public hearing. And that is the time to bring forward additional information you may have, other thoughts that you may have, or feedback you have. Well, the minutes are really a record of what occurred at our meeting. And that's really for the commission, the commissioners to comment on and ensure that they're accurate. So hold those thoughts, save them for the public hearing, and we look forward to hearing from folks at a public hearing on each application.
So is there a motion to approve as the minutes as amended? I'm sorry,
So
I
moved.
jumped ahead.
I'll second that.
Okay. Moved by Melanie Moser, seconded by Joe Hockner. All in favor indicate aye. Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We're good. That brings us to the end of one of our longer meetings. Thank you very much. and look forward to getting feedback on those action areas. And as you're going through them, also think about what subcommittee you'd like to be on and/or lead, because that will be the next step with these, so.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
Let me send you an email.
Melanie? Yeah.
Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? We're adjourned.
Melanie, I have 20 pounds
I can't just, okay, good.
H-Park material for you, since you're the liaison to H-Park.
To be official.
I will drop them off, I will call sometime this weekend, yes.